The human out of this disabled child started to appear on shelves at your local chain bookstore. Things that would have never been published in books, let alone online. Books like To Siri with Love, which had covert incest undertones, activists claiming it was ableist. Mommy blogs written by women with alleged cluster B personality disorders became the norm. A Bedford, New Hampshire woman would become really popular talking about her son Jack, who has autism.
My husband and I were sitting on the couch together, and he called my husband's cell phone. Jack is diagnosed with autism. He's 20, and he lives in a supported community a few hours from here. Our son Jack was diagnosed with autism 20 years ago. I can't even believe it. And it's something I started to do myself when I'm maybe like in a little bit of a disagreement with my husband or my kids. I ask myself, do I want to be right or do I want to make it right? And to me, those are two very different things. Like, I like to be right. I think it feels good, even though it's probably not always true. And also celebrating who Jack is and all that he does is sort of my goal with this kind of platform. And so I had a moment, and then I had to think, I know who I am and I know what I do, and be okay with that. But it's interesting how people, that keyboard courage is so very strong sometimes. We sort of caution our kids to be wary that if you wouldn't say something to someone's face, don't write about it, don't type about it, don't share about it. And every once in a while, social media kind of reminds me, but I will say there were some really strong reminders of how much good social media does.
Cariello was platformed in New Hampshire's largest newspaper on Mother's Day weekend in 2024, and months later was platformed to be the keynote speaker at the largest family support conference in the state. In short, you're rewarded for your bad behavior. It was after the pandemic, the permission structure of othering became worse. From disgruntled teacher YouTubers assuming that everyone in special education is using their disability as an excuse of accountability.
I would love to know, we've had a few special education teachers on, but what was the behavior like? What were some of the biggest behavioral challenges you went through?
A student, she left the premises, and I didn't know what to do. I was actually instructed to follow her, and I literally followed her through the neighborhood to her aunt's house. That's what I was told to do. I don't recall if we got the authorities involved at that time, but that was kind of like the biggest thing. I've gone under tables and tried to coax children out. I've been kicked and I've been hit, but I do understand that in that population, I won't say that that's acceptable, but that's kind of
throwing desks, to cursing, to absolutely ripping apart bulletin boards, to full-blown meltdowns where the EMS had to come. So in my mind, that's not trained, I'm not an expert, I'm thinking if this was really something that he couldn't control, I feel like we would have seen that within the first 4 weeks. But it felt to me like it was just little boundary pushes here and there. And then he's like, oh, okay, nobody's going to do anything. It's party time. And so I know that sounds insensitive to a lot of people, but I
experience that the general education teachers, they don't have a clue as to what's going on. They don't understand the 13 diagnosis. They don't understand, all the sides of special education. And so then it almost creates like this tension between the special education department and the general education, what they want to do. We're doing this at this time. So that aspect of it has absolutely gone out the window. The rules of engagements, students understanding their place and, the role of the teacher, and just being able to manage themselves. That's what I found.
Going to school in the 90s and the early 2000s, and there was a difference. It's just like kids knew that you would have to be crazy to cuss at a teacher's face. You would have to be crazy to like kind of like square up to a teacher and look them in the eye and say, no, I'm not doing this. You would have to be insane. And it's not like I was in these super rich, fancy areas. You know, I went to some Title I schools growing up too. And even there, the worst misbehavior was not in the classroom. It was in passing periods. It was in the cafeteria, maybe at recess when it was more peers together and kind of less teacher supervision. Scandalous. I was like, oh, he's making fun of the teacher. Like, but these days, like I've been called the B word to my face. I've had students say the most outlandish things to me. And it's so difficult to convince people that don't believe it, that no, kids are different today. And so I'm curious about, why do you think that is?
I firmly believe that it has to do with the lack of human exposure and more on the cell phones and more constantly looking at the screen.
To the manosphere using every which way to drop the R slur, to the policies in Trump 2.0.
Tylenol, don't take it. And don't give it to your child after your child is born. And do all those other things, little things, to spread out your visits, etc., etc.
And how the state locally reacted with radical positivity at such a tone-deaf level. Where does yours truly fit in? Somewhere in the 60%. Where are you? How do you feel as a student being gaslit by bitter ex-teachers for not being normal? Or how do you feel being in your mid-20s, being out in the community for 30 hours a week and not even working the full hours, assuming you have a job? The brutal 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. for those night owls. Your peers are being pushed changes a decade ago to be implemented just before the pandemic, and where has it left you? Are you speaking out, or are you being told to be silent? And this goes back to what I did 10 and a half years ago, because for me, I felt not only the life I would never have, but it was going to be taken away by the extremes, and that's why we are in a mess. Parents will not be criminally prosecuted for exploiting your child for financial or social gain. Special ed professionals will never be accounted for the criminal slander to the students that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. State agencies that had large surplus of funds never took any responsibility, passing accountability to the rank and file and individuals themselves. That's how I feel. The whole Laconia State school closure, what has that done to the state? What if I were to tell you that a diet kid coach, some people at the DHHS level was aware of me making a statement that I felt that me and my peers would be walking in a plexiglass telephone booth where they can't see or touch anything around them. Ironic, that was just 5 years before the pandemic. You can't make this shit up. As I previously stated, the media and our political institutions are permanently broken. The activists are up in your asses, and people, numbers that I'm unable to quantify because the forced political nature, are hurting.